Hey everybody, this is Daniel Klein,
Daniel Seriff.
and we are going to talk today about maintaining the gear on this episode of the Guitar Lab podcast. And Daniel and I got together and we thought in writing down which episodes, what we would discuss, that gear is really important because we work so hard for the money that we spend on gear,
Especially as musicians.
yes, and also, these are investments, and so it's only right that we take care of them because we'll be able to not only maintain the value, but also the longevity of the instrument.
Yeah, one of the things about our podcast we talked about is we don't want to dig too far into gear all the time, but having gear that works and having gear that you can take, to your gigs or your sessions or, just reliably sit down and be able to practice with it, that's really important to us. So that's kind of where we're coming at with the this particular podcast.
Yeah, and it's also, at least I've found, that it's just more enjoyable to have a guitar that stays in tune, that's clean, that has fresh strings and whatnot. Because old strings are problematic. They don't stay in tune.
Totally.
You get the a
Weird
lot easier.
intonation, yeah.
Yeah. So when we were discussing this, the first thing that came to mind is don't even worry about the gear. Worry about yourself first. Make sure that you approach the instrument with clean hands. We had touched on it, I think, 2 or 3 episodes ago about the Cheetos guy at the open gig or open mic gig. And that's the perfect example of what not to do. So keeping yourself clean, and then also, watch out for the rings, the watches, the belt buckles.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever seen like those classic guitars that are just beautiful on the front, and you turn around the back and it's like all jarred up from a belt buckle,
some rodeo belt buckle, some championship 8-second person.
This guitar is from Texas.
And so I remember working in retail. I worked at a store for years selling guitars and such, and we would just have to tell people like, hey man, you can play this guitar, but would you please take off your leather jacket, because it's got these big zippers and whatnot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because getting your guitar repaired as far as finish work and stuff like that is really expensive if it's done right.
Yeah, totally. Especially, like good companies where you actually ship it back to them and they do it kind of to a factory standard.
Yeah.
Super expensive. Hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
And on gear like that, because a lot of my clients do opt for that option, you're going to be without your guitar for 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know like even great companies like PRS, their backlog in regards to their repair shop is pretty lengthy.
Yeah, and it only takes a second for something to go bad, and so that whole ounce of prevention, pound to cure thing is really apt in that regard.
Which is a great segue into talking about kind of storing and how to carry your instruments around.
Totally. Most people use gig bags or cases. What's your preference and why?
Yeah, so it's big for me. I much prefer gig bags. Now, I'm not saying that I would ever check a gig bag into an airplane or anything like that. In fact, I have a whole case situation for that. But if I'm playing a local gig or if I'm on the road, I typically buy a mono case, or I really also like the Reunion Blues. And those are heavily padded, really great bags. If I'm flying, I actually have like a $300 Pelican case that I take my gig bag and I put it inside of the Pelican case and make sure it can't move around.
Right.
And it's like for traveling with rifles. So, I mean, it's like a heavy duty.
Sure.
case.
And gig bags, are kind of like cars in the sense that you can get you can get, a Kia, or you can get a Mercedes,
Right.
and, a lot of the introductory gig bags, they're basically just cloth with a zipper.
Absolutely.
And they provide really no real protection. I always found it's better just to invest in something maybe with a little bit of maybe headstock or neck support.
Totally.
That way, if the gig bag, let's say you put it up against a couch and it slides over, you're not going to have to deal with a $300 or $400 headstock repair.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I would say that if you're not spending between $150 and $250 on a gig bag, you're probably not in the realm where it's really actually going to offer much protection.
Totally. And, a gig bag, like a lot of other gear, if you maintain it right, it will last forever.
Totally. I have my first mono bag that I got 10 years ago, and it still works great.
I've got clients that tour the world. Very big name clients that you would be surprised. You would think that they'd have these, industry giant cases, but they use mostly mono bags, and they work really, really well. The whole shoulder strap is great. And also they've got some good accessory pockets for different things like capos and
cables and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Extra
for sure.
Strings, yeah.
Cases are great, but cases are very bulky, and they take up a lot of space. And, like if you live in New York City, having that case, putting it next to you on the subway is going to be a lot more problematic than just having something on your shoulder.
Totally. I've also found that it actually, if I carry around a hard case, it makes me play the guitar worse. Yeah, so just like the tiredness that happens from holding the case to and from the gig. I mean, it depends on how far your load-in is, but when I was in school, we were toting our guitar cases all over the place.
Right.
So I got a shoulder strap for my guitar case, even back then when it was like classical guitar. So I think that a hard soft case is a great way to go.
Yeah, and most times I've found that if you are the type of person that's taking your guitar to a show or session, 9 times out of 10 you're probably carrying an amp or a pedal board as well.
Boom, boom.
And so having 3 things that have to be handled is just nearly impossible, especially if you've got stairs, a crowded area. That's why throwing it on your back, having maybe a small pedal board case like a Temple or a pedal train,
totally,
and then maybe a small amp, and you're good to go.
And then you are what we call the one trip wonder.
Yes, and that is huge if the studio or the gig is on the 8th floor,
and
the elevator is out.
Wonder.
Yeah, and especially if you got to park your car, like double park it before you. Don't do that. Don't
exactly.
Don't do that. So if now let's just talk about storage of the guitar when you're not having to lug it around.
Yeah, totally. So a lot of you might look over here. We're actually behind Daniel, and you can see on the wall a little bit. I keep my guitars out. Now, this studio is specifically built as a studio, and it's climate controlled, and I do pay attention to it. So it's not that this advice, I haven't taken to heart. It is true. You want to really take care of your guitars, and really a big thing is not putting your guitar beside a heater or, cooling device. That's a kind of a bad place to put it.
Totally. Yeah, and also keep it out of the sunlight. If you're going to keep it in your house or in the studio, just keep it out of the sunlight, because that gets hot really quick. And it does a number of things. Number one, it can change the color itself. We've seen, look at any 30, 40-year-old guitar. The colors most likely have faded either from stage lights or sunlight.
Totally, yeah.
And then the finish can crack, and not a good way, not a relic way.
Not the fun kind.
And it also can dry out your wood and really
mess
adjust
up your action and your intonation and everything.
Yeah, for sure.
That also, that really means, goes for like if you're in the car, if you're going to the gig. A lot of my friends, say they go into a restaurant or something to have, a pre-gig meal or post-gig meal or whatever. Like, you bring your guitar in. You do not leave it in the car, Daniel has a really great saying, I think, about just protecting the guitar.
Absolutely. I was in Canada visiting, doing some business, and it was a blizzard. And so my rule of thumb is if you wouldn't sleep there, don't put your gear there, not even for a half an hour.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, your guitar can get significantly messed up in 120 degree.
Right, or in -4,
Totally, yeah.
And I believe I mentioned this, I remember being backstage at a number of different, high-level amphitheater and arena shows, and the first thing that they do off the truck is get those guitars, off of, they use drawers, so you've got 8 or 10, in a vault. But man, they absolutely get that open, get the air circulating
acclimated.
in there.
Yeah.
And that is literally the first thing that happens.
Totally, yeah. Because, if you guys don't know, you take your guitar out of a cold air-conditioned room, you bring it out on stage to where you're in front of the sun and it's a 90-degree day, you're going to have crazy tuning issues. Your guitar is going to be sweating.
Yep.
No good at all.
Yeah, and if you're backstage in your trailer or bus or whatever, and it's AC and it's cool, then you're going out to a stage that's out in the sun, and it's August. Man, you are in for a really bad show.
A lot of those cats have backstage guitars and little amp rigs so that they can warm up, and that's like part of the situation, and then they have their real guitars that they play on stage out front.
Yeah, basically the guitars are just off stage and their tech hands it to them, or it's just literally on the stage just waiting for them to pick it up. And that way everything's acclimated. And most everyone I know, with the very few exceptions, every single show you get new strings.
Yeah, totally.
For that.
So we were going to mention basic guitar maintenance. We're not going into guitar tech land, really.
Nope. So luthiers will not have to hunt us down and send us hate mail. So changing your strings. First of all, there is no set specific interval of when you need to change your strings.
It really has to do with actually your body's chemistry and the kind of strings that you choose.
Absolutely. Along with the environment that the guitar is in.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
I know people who can wear out a set of strings in one evening.
Absolutely.
And not even on stage, just like doing a studio session. Like they sweat so much.
Totally.
It's just like,
and it's very acidic.
Oh man, yeah, and then you're basically having barbed wire. It's horrible. But cleaning off your guitar, polishing it is really, really big too. And I always try every time I'm done with the instrument, I always just, before I set it down, I have a microfiber cloth that I just wipe it down with.
Yeah.
Make sure the strings are clean, and that way, next time I do approach the instrument after my hands are clean, everything's going to be cool.
I think especially wiping the strings down after you play just adds so much longevity on them, and you can really play the same set for a lot longer. So if you're having trouble where you're killing strings really quickly, if you start doing that, that's a massive help.
For sure. Now, there are people who do not subscribe to that at all. In fact, I was watching a rig rundown with Mike Campbell of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, who he's one of my favorite players.
Great
amazing
player.
Tone,
So
just
good.
Awesome. And his tech was saying, he was showing the guitars to the gentleman doing the interview, and the amount of dirt on the fretboard was shocking.
That's where the tone comes from, man.
And he literally said, if I clean the fretboard, I'm fired.
I love
He says,
that. That's
anyone
amazing.
who touches the fretboard, they're immediately fired. So there are, obviously, exceptions to the rule. But I'm also not Mike Campbell.
Yeah,
and
he's
will never
cool.
be.
He's got so much vibe. I don't think we can touch him. So
Yeah, he gets an exception for everything.
or his strings, honestly.
Yeah, it's
tetanus filled.
Yeah, it's and if you do apply any kind of polish or spray on the guitar, don't apply it to the guitar.
Yeah, not directly.
Right. Always put it on a cloth. And if you've never used this product, just pick a really small area on the back, put it on a little bit, wait, see if there's any kind of funky thing that happens. And then once everything is cool, then just go ahead and do what you need to do. But just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to be honest. I like to keep my strings clean, but I do not care about polishing my guitar. So like my Tom Henry, there's actually a video of it on my channel.
Maybe we can put that description in the thumbnail.
Yeah, we'll put a link in there. But there's a lot of goo on my 2006 Heritage, and it's like I kind of like it. It makes it look more vintagey. It's a cool vibe. Some guitars I absolutely will clean all the time.
Right.
But like for me, and I was talking about this with some students last night, but like I like for a guitar to feel very modern and very nice and clean and like a race car, but I like for it to sound and look like a little bit like it has a little bit more vibe. That's just a personal thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's totally true. I think we should talk about strap locks because when your guitar drops as you're playing it, that's a bad thing, man.
So rough. I've had it happen.
Absolutely.
I've had it happen with the strap locks, but it was, my fault.
Okay. And by strap locks, we're not particularly endorsing any particular strap lock.
Lots of great options, honestly.
Right. The really big thing are those like neoprene washers that are red that you can put on there.
Those are really cool. I actually have thought about converting a little bit more to those recently because the straps that I use are a little bit thicker now. They revamped them.
Yeah.
And so that would actually really work well for me. Those are great.
Yeah. I mean, even the top of the line strap locks are about $35.
Yeah, not too
and
expensive.
That again, it's a lifetime purchase, and the only really negative thing about that type of or that style of strap lock is you have to replace the strap pins, which if you're playing a 56 Strat, you might not want to do.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I think it's like, again, we aren't going to endorse any particular brands in regards to this, but like one thing you might do is you might find your favorite type, and then you put it on all your guitars, and then all of your straps have those same strap locks. So like, you know, you don't have to go fishing around for the right strap for the right guitar all the time, unless that's your vibe. Because I know some people like certain looks with their straps and everything. I'm more like utilitarian a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. But it only needs to happen once, and then you're a convert.
Yeah.
So take it from us. Learn from our mistakes.
I've never lost a guitar headstock or broken a neck from that. I've caught the guitar, but it's scary.
I have.
Oh no, you lost one?
I had to repair the headstock. Yeah.
That's
it was my 336. So
dang, even worse.
that was a rough day, man.
Yeah, that's not fun.
Rough,
man.
Yeah. All right, so some basic things that are a little bit more advanced are things like cleaning your pots.
Totally.
Deoxit is invaluable.
If you're a guitarist, you got to have a can of Deoxit. Not only does it work great on, you know, cleaning your pots and switches, it's great for your pedal board, you know, making sure all the connections are good. I mean, dust is going to accumulate.
Dust, dirt, and grime and oxidation, and that stuff can really, really hurt you. It can even make things not work.
Yeah, besides kill your tone, you know, I've definitely have turned my knob before on a guitar and been like, wow, that's weird. Nothing.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and again, we're talking about something that costs $6, and it's just worth it. So not all players are into this, but players like Joe Bonamassa swear by it as like that lubrication of the nut.
Totally.
It just helps, you know, bending strings. It helps me with intonation, you know, because you know you don't have that where the string just kinks up all of a sudden.
Absolutely.
Also, if you've got odd ratio tuners, you know, that aren't so smooth, it'll certainly help it go across that nut.
That's cool. And whammy bar things, right?
For sure. Yeah. So, and also help your guitar return to proper tune once whatever you're doing to manipulate the string.
Totally. Yeah. So it's basically essentially just a little graphite that goes in between the string and the nut and helps it move more smoothly there. And it's cheap and great.
So cheap, and it's not something you have to apply all the time. I mean, once every week or so, and you're good. You know? But speaking of periodically taking care of things, for players like myself, I won't speak for you, but every 6 months or so, I feel better just having my guitar checked out by a professional.
Totally. I'm a like 2 or 3 times a year person. It's gonna run you around $75 as long as nothing's like wrong, you know, with the guitar. I mean, I've heard of people being very, very expensive, but you can find somebody who does a great job for $75, $100 or so, and they're just gonna go over the guitar, make sure everything's cleaned up, everything's playing well, adjust the action, adjust the intonation, because it came tuned at the factory doesn't mean that it stays tuned.
Correct. Absolutely. And sometimes, you know, of the little tweaks that we might do ourselves, whether it be intonation or adjusting the neck, sometimes they can catch something that we might have done wrong.
Totally.
And then once you get it back, you're like, wow, this plays so much better. And it's a very pleasant surprise.
I honestly, I used to be very scared of doing any kind of tech work. Nowadays, you know, my tech has kind of confirmed, like, you really would have to mess it up pretty bad to hurt your guitar.
Right.
So, you know, I'll do small truss rod adjustments, things like that. I like to have those types of tools around, especially like if I'm on the road, because my tech's not there. You know, it's very hard to find somebody who could work on it. So you want to have a little knowledge, enough to just do very light tweaking. Yeah,
and speaking of tools, I just think a really basic setup of, like, the D'Addario has a really nice multi-tool.
I love that, yeah.
And we're not sponsored by D'Addario, so
they just make great stuff.
They just make really good stuff. So, you know, having a good set of wire cutters, I think is really good. Having a microfiber cloth, like I mentioned earlier, but one without any polish or anything, so it's totally dry.
Totally, yeah, because you don't want to put your polish cloth on the strings.
Correct.
That adds to corrosive potential.
Yeah, and then I always carry a small hand towel just to put over the body of my guitar.
Nice.
Just so...
In the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so if I do have to lay it down, you know, I'm not exposing the finish to something like a ring or a watch or someone, you know, coming by and maybe spilling something. You know?
Interesting.
Yeah, and then if you have the room, you can get a neck support, you know, which is really nice. So
D'Addario makes one of those too.
Exactly.
Lots of cool,
you know,
cool brands that make those.
Basic screwdriver, you know, just essential, you know, just really basic things, man.
Yeah.
And it really will make a difference, not only in your playing, but in just the longevity of your instrument.
I would say, a lot of guitar brands are different. I think it's really worthwhile to make sure you have the exact truss rod wrench, whether it be an Allen style or you like more of the socket wrench. Make sure you have that, and it might depend on your situation. Like for me, I kind of mix up cases a lot of times because I'm using mostly monos. But what I'll do if, say, I'm going out or something like that, or going to a gig, I'll make sure that whatever guitar I'm putting in that case has the proper tools that fit, and I actually have them labeled, so that I know that if something's acting weird, like I go to a more humid or more dry location, I can make the guitar play correctly so that I can perform my best, essentially.
Sure. And having taught for over a decade, I regularly had students try to do something themselves, and they just necessarily weren't aware of the ramifications. Like maybe they bought a guitar that had 9s on it, and they set it up with 11s.
Yeah.
And they would come back and be like, Daniel, I don't understand. Like my action's 3/8 of an inch off the fretboard. What's happening? And no one really broke it down with, you've got to compensate.
Absolutely,
for that.
How many pounds does each string add to the guitar? It's like 20 pounds per string of pressure?
At least.
Yeah.
It's
so
substantial.
It's a massive amount. So if you think about going up, 2 or 3 gauges in string, all of a sudden your guitar is going to be like fighting those strings, right? And that's going to basically bend the neck forward. You're going to have crazy neck bow.
Right. And there are some really awesome YouTube tutorials on string changing, neck adjustment, intonation, things like that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, nowadays we're surrounded by really great information, and you can tell. I mean, type it in, say, ooh, this one has really good views, has really good ratings. Let's check that one out.
Yeah. I can vouch for pretty much every video that Stu Mac has made that I've seen has been amazing.
Golden.
Those guys are like the cream of the crop.
Yeah, they're just so awesome. And, all the luthiers that we work with buy their tools from Stu Mac. I mean,
exactly. And we're not sponsored by Stu Mac. So, we're not sponsored by anyone yet.
But we could be. So,
yes.
Diodario, Stu Mac.
There it is.
Are you watching?
But another rule of thumb I have is if I'm not comfortable doing something with my guitar, I just don't do it.
Yeah, I agree. It's like you don't need to learn that if it just feels like it's out of your wheelhouse. Take it to a professional, let them deal with it, and you'll be golden.
Yeah, and also, while you don't want to irritate any tech, I've also found them to be very receptive to questions about like, hey, when this happens, what should I do?
Totally.
And they're like, oh yeah, well, if this happens, go ahead and adjust this maybe a quarter turn.
Yeah.
Wait a couple minutes, make sure it's tuned up,
Yeah. I think generally, especially if that's like your tech and you pay them money a couple times a year, they're going to be happy to say, oh yeah, you can do that yourself, in between setups.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it works out well for everyone, and it's just having a good tech in your area is fantastic. I know a lot of people who send their guitars out, and boy, that to me is a little risky.
It's a lot, yeah. I when COVID was happening, I actually had to leave my heritage in New Orleans when I moved back, and they were plucking it. So they ended up shipping it back. It shipped back beautifully, and I got it. But it's like that's dicey,
And for those who might not be familiar with what a plec job is.
Plec, yeah. So a plec is a really incredibly expensive machine that's kind of based around CNC operating, right? And so what it can do is it can level your frets like absolutely perfectly to like the 1,000s, 10,000s, maybe even.
I believe so.
Yeah, so incredibly accurate. And so that heritage that I have is like an amazing guitar, but it has like a little bit of wonkiness to it. So something like when they level out the frets perfectly like that, machine perfect, everything kind of feels really beautiful, even if the neck has some weirdness to it.
Yeah, and that's by no means a necessity, but some people swear by plex, and they definitely are very expensive to get that job done. But the people who I know use them, they really do swear by them.
Yeah, I had 2 guitars plucked while I was there. The Heritage, it was like mind-blowing, the difference. And then I had my Novo, and it was just like, yeah, it probably wasn't worth it.
Really?
So, yeah, I think it just really depends if, your tech would be knowledgeable, and then, just consider it maybe if they're recommending it.
Absolutely. Well, we really do hope that you enjoyed this episode number 4 of the Gear Pack.
The Guitar Lab podcast.
It's so new, I'm having a hard time saying it. The Guitar Lab podcast. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you have any particular questions, or if you have an idea for a topic that we should cover in the future. We'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much for watching. We'll
see
see you
everybody.
soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.